Emergency dispatch is the loneliest job in the world. I want to be precise about that because loneliness is a word that people use carelessly, and precision matters in this work more than in almost any other. The loneliness of emergency dispatch is not the loneliness of isolation. You are never truly alone in a dispatch center, never without the ambient presence of other operators at other stations, the supervisors moving through the room, the low continuous murmur of a facility that runs 24 hours without interruption. You are physically surrounded by people at all times. The loneliness is the other kind. The kind that comes from being the person at the exact boundary between the ordinary world and its worst moments. The person who picks up the phone when someone's life has just changed in a direction it will not come back from. The person who hears what fear actually sounds like, not the performed fear of films, not the dramatic fear of stories, but the real thing. The unguarded, undirected, utterly honest fear of someone for whom the worst has just arrived without warning and who has no one else to call. You hear that sound all night. And then you drive home in the morning and you stop at a coffee shop and you order something and the person behind the counter asks how you are and you say fine. And they have no idea. And you have no way to explain. That is the loneliness. I had been doing the work for 6 years when I transferred to the Millhaven Regional Emergency Communication Center. Not a demotion. A lateral move, the kind that happens when a relationship ends and the apartment you shared is in the city where you both work and the city starts to feel like a space designed to remind you of things you are trying not to be reminded of. I requested the transfer. The regional center was 40 miles north. Smaller facility. Fewer staff. Rural service area. Quieter nights. I thought quieter nights were what I needed. I was wrong about that. But wrong in a way I could not have anticipated. The Millhaven Center was smaller than my previous posting in every way. 12 operator stations instead of 40. A staff of 30 cycling through 3 shifts. A service area covering 3 counties of mixed rural and small town geography, farms, forest, highway, small communities with their small community emergencies. My supervisor was a woman named Rains. 15 years in dispatch. That duration in this work ages people in specific ways that are not about the face or the body. Ways that live in the eyes. The particular quality of someone who has heard everything and has built around themselves whatever structure is necessary to keep hearing it without it taking more than they are willing to give. She oriented me on my first day with the efficiency of someone who had given this orientation many times and had reduced it to its functional minimum. You'll cover overnight. 11 to 7. Station 4. The system here is the same platform you used in the city. Different regional protocols, I'll walk you through those. A pause. There is one thing I want to tell you before your first shift. Go ahead, I said. She looked at her desk. Not finding something on it. The look of someone choosing how to say something. We have a caller, she said. Recurring. Overnight shift. Not every night, irregular. But recurring over approximately 2 years. Regular callers are not uncommon, I said. The clinical language of dispatch training for what the work more honestly called frequent flyers, people whose circumstances produced repeated emergency contact. Mental health crises. Domestic situations. Chronic medical. She's not a regular caller in the standard sense, Rain said. The call pattern doesn't fit any standard category. What category does it fit? I said. She looked at me for a moment. I want you to take the call yourself before I tell you more, she said. The briefing would shape the experience in ways that might not be useful. Take the call. Then come to me. You're using me as a control, I said. I'm using you as a fresh pair of ears, she said. Yes. She walked me through the regional protocols. I started my first overnight shift at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. The first 4 hours were what she had described. Light. A medical assist 12 miles from the nearest hospital, elderly man, chest pain, ambulance coordinated with the efficiency of 6 years of practice. A structure fire, small, contained quickly. A Route 9 highway incident, 2 vehicles, no critical injuries. The routine of the work settling back into its grooves like water finding channels. At 3:14 a.m. Station 4's line lit. I answered. Emergency services, what is the nature of your emergency? A pause. Then a voice. I will try to describe the voice accurately because the voice is where everything begins and everything that follows depends on understanding what it was. A woman's voice. Quiet. Clear in a way that certain voices are clear, not loud but without interference. Every call I had ever taken carried the acoustic imperfections of phone communication. Background noise. Signal variation. The degradation of a call made from distress under difficult conditions. This call had none of that. Just the voice. I need help, it said. I don't know if anyone can hear me. I can hear you, I said. You've reached emergency services. Can you tell me your name and location? A pause. My name is Eleanor Marsh, the voice said. I'm at 14, Aldridge Road. I need help. I've needed help for a long time and I don't know if this reaches anyone. Eleanor, I can hear you clearly. Can you tell me the nature of your emergency? Something is wrong, she said. With the house. Something has been wrong for a very long time and I don't know who to call. I've tried calling before. I don't know if the calls go through. Your call is going through, I said. I can hear you. Can you describe what's happening in the house? A long pause. It's cold, she said. It's very cold and it shouldn't be. And there's a sound I can't locate. I've been trying to locate it for a long time. I began the location verification process. The system's address lookup for 14, Aldridge Road. It returned no result. Eleanor, I'm having difficulty locating your address in our system. Can you confirm the street name and number? 14, Aldridge Road, she said again. I've lived here for 22 years. The address is 14, Aldridge Road. I tried alternate spellings. I tried the county database. I tried the property records interface. Nothing. Eleanor, I said, is there a nearby intersection you can describe? A landmark. A pause longer than the others. I don't think you can find me, she said. Quietly. Without despair. The way someone says something they have said many times and have arrived at a place of acceptance about. I don't think you can send anyone. I think I'm asking for something you can't do. I want to help you, I said. If you can give me any additional. I know, she said. I know you want to help. That's why I keep calling. Because sometimes the person who answers sounds like they actually want to help. That matters. Even if you can't come. Eleanor. Thank you for answering, she said. Thank you for hearing me. The line went quiet. Not disconnected. Not the click of a terminated call. Just quiet. As if the voice had simply stopped and the line was waiting to see if it would resume. It did not resume. I sat at station 4 and looked at the call log entry and the empty address field and the absence of any GPS location data and felt something I had not felt in 6 years of emergency dispatch. Not the professional response. Not the trained, managed, calibrated response that the work built in you over time. Something older than training. The specific quality of having heard something you do not have a category for. At 7 am I went to Rains. She looked at my face when I walked into her office. You got the call, she said. Yes, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Sit down, she said. Eleanor Marsh, I said. 14, Aldridge Road. Who is she? Rains looked at me with those 15 years eyes. Eleanor Marsh, she said, died 2 years ago. Raines gave me the file. Not a thin file. Not the sparse record of a peripheral case that no one had taken seriously enough to document properly. A substantial file, 2 years of documentation, organized with the specific care of someone who had understood from early on that whatever this was, it needed to be kept accurately. She set it on the desk between us and let me read. I will tell you what the file contained in the shape of it rather than the exhaustive detail, because the detail matters less than the pattern, and the pattern is what the 2 years of documentation had been building toward. The first call had come 18 months before Raines herself had started compiling the file. It had been handled by an operator named Delaney who had filed a standard incident report noting an unverified address and a caller who had disconnected before additional information could be obtained. Standard. Unremarkable in isolation. The kind of call that happens dozens of times a year at any regional dispatch center, disconnected, unverified, no action possible. The second call came 11 days later. Same voice. Same name. Same address. Same inability to locate the address in any database. Different operator. Similar report. The third call came 8 days after that. By the sixth call, 3 different operators had handled Eleanor Marsh and each had filed an incident report, and none of them had connected their report to the previous ones because the filing system categorized unverified address calls in a way that did not surface recurring patterns without deliberate searching. Raines had done the deliberate searching 14 months ago. She had been reviewing incident reports for a quality assurance audit, a routine process, not targeted at anything specific, when she had noticed the name. Eleanor Marsh. 3 reports in close succession, then a gap, then 2 more, then a longer gap, then 4 in 2 weeks. She had searched the full archive. 23 calls over approximately 10 months at that point. All overnight. All between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. All from the same caller identifying herself as Eleanor Marsh at 14 Aldridge Road. All resulting in the same outcome: no verifiable address, no dispatchable location, caller disconnecting before additional information could be obtained. She had searched the name Eleanor Marsh in every database the center had access to. Property records. Voter registration. Utility accounts. Medical records where accessible. The county's records management system. Eleanor Marsh appeared in 1 record. A death certificate. Eleanor Marie Marsh. Born 1961. Died 2 years ago, 14 months before Raines found the file. Cause of death listed as cardiac failure. Address at time of death listed as 14 Aldridge Road, Millhaven County. The address that did not appear in any current database. Because 14 Aldridge Road had been demolished 18 months before Eleanor Marsh's death. The property had been purchased by a land development company, the structure cleared, the land left fallow pending a rezoning application that had not yet been approved. The address had been removed from the active address registry. The road itself had been closed and its signage removed. 14 Aldridge Road no longer existed. The address that Eleanor Marsh was calling from had been demolished before she died. And she had been calling from it for 2 years after her death. I read the documentation to that point and I sat with it in the way you sit with something that has no adequate container in your existing understanding and that requires you to either build a new container or push it toward an explanation you know is inadequate. She's calling from an address that doesn't exist, I said. And she's been dead for 2 years. Yes, Raines said. What is your working explanation? I said. I've had several working explanations across 14 months of monitoring this, she said. None of them have survived contact with the full evidence. Walk me through them, I said. The first was identity theft, she said. Someone using Eleanor Marsh's name. Possible but inconsistent with the call content. Eleanor Marsh's call content includes specific personal details that we have subsequently verified against records. Details that would require either access to very comprehensive private records or genuine personal knowledge. What kind of details? I said. The calls are not all like the one you received last night, she said. The early calls were similar, the cold house, the sound she can't locate, the uncertainty about whether the calls go through. But over time the calls have developed. Eleanor has talked more, given more. In the calls where the operator has engaged her in sustained conversation rather than moving immediately to address verification, she has described her life at 14 Aldridge Road. Her husband, who predeceased her by 4 years. Her daughter, who lives out of state. Her job, she was a librarian for 30 years. Details that we have verified against records. A person could research those details, I said. They could, Rain said. But the emotional quality of the calls is not consistent with performance. I've heard them. Not all of them, I wasn't monitoring when most of them came in. But I've heard the recordings. There are recordings, I said. The center records all calls, she said. Standard. The recordings of Eleanor Marsh's calls are in the file. What's the quality of the recordings? I said. That's the next thing I want you to look at, she said. She turned her computer monitor toward me. Opened an audio file. I put on the headset. What I heard was not what I expected. The recordings were clear. Extraordinarily clear. Better than the recording quality of standard calls, in the same way that the call itself had been clearer than standard calls. The voice was identical to what I had heard at 3:14 a.m. The same quality. The same absence of acoustic interference. But the recording had a secondary quality that the live call had not had. A quality in the background of the audio. Not a sound exactly. A texture. Like the specific acoustic signature of a space, the way every room has a reverberant quality that distinguishes it from other rooms, that carries in the recording the information of the physical environment the sound was produced in. The background texture of Eleanor Marsh's calls was not the texture of any indoor space I had encountered in 6 years of call recording. It was the texture of somewhere that was not quite inside in any conventional sense. Not outside either. Somewhere in between. Somewhere that the acoustic properties suggested was larger than a room and smaller than an open space, and that had qualities of both and the specific properties of neither. The recording environment, I said. Yes, Rain said. Our technical consultant could not characterize it. He described it as acoustically anomalous. Anomalous how? The reverberant properties don't correspond to any known building type or room configuration, she said. He said it was as if the recording was made in a space that doesn't have consistent physical boundaries. That the acoustic reflections are coming from distances that change between calls. I took off the headset. Second explanation, I said. Equipment malfunction, she said. Some systematic error producing false calls. I had the center's entire communication system audited. No malfunction found. The calls are entering the system from an external source. A real phone number producing a real call. What's the number? I said. That's explanation 3's problem, she said. She turned to another section of the file. The calls register in the system with a caller ID. A Millhaven County number. We traced it. And? It's the number for 14 Aldridge Road, she said. The landline that was registered to Eleanor Marsh at that address until the property was demolished. The number was disconnected when the property was vacated. It should not be capable of placing calls. But it is, I said. The calls are coming from Eleanor Marsh's disconnected landline, she said. From a property that no longer exists. From a woman who has been dead for 2 years. The office was very quiet. You've had 14 months of this, I said. Yes, she said. And you have not reported it through official channels, I said. Beyond this center. She was quiet for a moment. I filed a report with the County Communications Authority 8 months ago, she said. Describing the calls in technical terms. The anomalous caller ID. The unverifiable address. The recording quality issues. I did not include the identity of the caller or the fact that the caller is deceased. Why not? Because the response to technical anomalies is a technical investigation, she said. And a technical investigation of these calls would result in one of two outcomes. Either the investigation would find an explanation, a fraud, a malfunction, something that reduced the calls to something manageable, or it would not. If it did not, the calls would be discontinued. The number would be blocked. Whatever Eleanor Marsh is doing when she calls this center would be ended. She looked at me. And I am not certain that ending it is the right thing to do, she said. Why not? I said. Because she keeps calling, she said. 2 years of calls from a dead woman at a demolished address on a disconnected phone line. Whatever Eleanor Marsh is, she is not random. She is not equipment noise. She has a consistent identity and consistent needs, and she keeps calling because the calling is doing something. Serving some purpose. What purpose? I said. I don't know, she said. That's why I wanted an unbriefed operator to take the call. Because the operators I've briefed respond to the calls differently from how they would respond to an ordinary caller. They are managing their own response to the knowledge of what she is rather than simply listening to what she says. And you want to know what she says, I said. Really says. To someone who is just listening. I want to know what she needs, she said. Because she has been calling for 2 years and whatever she needs, she hasn't gotten it yet. And I have 14 months of evidence that the need is real and the calls are real, and Eleanor Marsh, whatever Eleanor Marsh is now, is not done. I looked at the file. At the call logs. The recordings. The death certificate. The property records of a demolished house. The technical reports on a disconnected phone line that kept making calls. You want me to listen, I said. I want you to listen the way you listened before I told you any of this, she said. The way you listened last night when you didn't know. That quality of listening. That's what she needs from the other end of the line. I looked at the death certificate. At Eleanor Marsh's photograph attached to the file. A woman in her 60s. Warm eyes. The specific quality of someone who had spent 30 years as a librarian and had the expression that work produces, patient, attentive, the expression of someone who understood that the point was to help the person find what they were looking for. When does she call again? I said. We don't know, Rain said. Irregular pattern. Could be tonight. Could be 2 weeks from now. Then I'll be at Station 4, I said. I went home. I did not sleep. I lay in my apartment and I thought about a woman calling from a demolished house on a disconnected phone line asking for help she did not believe could be given. 2 years of calls. 23 when Rains had first found them. More since. An accumulating record of someone who kept trying because the alternative to trying was not trying, and not trying was not something she had been able to accept. I thought about the specific quality of her voice on the recording. Not afraid. Not desperate. Something that I had heard in calls before and that I had always found harder to manage than the obvious distress of fear and desperation. The quality of someone who has been waiting a very long time. And has not given up. She called again on the 4th night. Not the 2nd or the 3rd. The 4th. I sat at Station 4 through 3 overnight shifts with the specific quality of attention that the work had always required and that now carried an additional layer, the awareness that at some point between 1 and 4 a.m. the line might light and the voice might be there, and I needed to be ready not just professionally but in the way Rains had described. Ready to listen. The 4th night was a Friday. The call volume had been higher than the previous 3, a farm accident, 2 medical assists, a domestic situation that had required careful coordination with the sheriff's department and had taken the kind of emotional attention that good dispatch work demanded and that left a residue even after the call was resolved. By 2 am I had been running at a sustained level of engagement that the work sometimes required, and that was tiring in ways that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. At 2:41 a.m. Station 4's line lit. I answered. Emergency services. A pause. The specific pause I had been waiting for. You answered again, Eleanor Marsh said. Not the standard opening. Not I need help. Not the preamble of the first call. Something that told me she had recognized my voice. That she was tracking the person on the other end the way you track people who matter. Eleanor, I said. I'm here. You know my name, she said. A statement. Not surprise. Something closer to relief. I do, I said. I've been hoping you'd call back. A pause. Longer than the first one. No one has said that to me before, she said. I heard what that meant. 2 years of calls. The careful, professional, protocol-driven responses of operators doing their jobs correctly. Attempting address verification. Attempting to dispatch help. None of them saying I've been hoping you'd call back. None of them saying the thing that made the call a conversation rather than a procedure. I have questions, I said. If you're willing to answer them. I'll answer what I can, she said. I don't always know what I know. Some things are clearer than others. Tell me about where you are, I said. Not the address. What it's like. A pause. The sound of thinking. It's the house, she said. My house. 14, Aldridge Road. Except it isn't quite. It's like the house when it was not at its best. Before we painted it last time. Before David fixed the porch in 2009. She stopped. It's the house from a specific time. I can't tell which time exactly. Time is different here. Different how? I said. It's not a line, she said. It used to be a line. You could stand on it and look back to where you'd been and forward to where you were going. Now it's more like the room. You're in it. All of it is there. But you don't move through it the same way. When you say it's cold, I said. The cold you've described in the calls. Yes, she said. Is it always cold or does it change? It's more cold when I've been here longer, she said. Less cold right after I call. Like the calling warms it slightly. Or like the calling is of a window. And the warmth comes through the window. A pause. That probably sounds strange. It doesn't, I said. And meant it. The sound, she said. The one I can't locate. It's still here. It's been here since I arrived. Can you describe it? She was quiet for a moment. The background quality of the recording, the acoustically anomalous space that the technical consultant had not been able to characterize, was present in the line. I listened to it while she thought. Tried to find its edges. It had the quality of a large space and the quality of a very small space simultaneously. The reverberant contradiction of something that did not correspond to known physical geometries. It's low, she said. Below what you'd normally call a sound. More felt than heard. And it's structured. Not random. It has a pattern to it. I've been trying to understand the pattern for a long time. Do you have a sense of what it is? I said. I have a theory, she said. I don't know if my theories are reliable. I wasn't a scientist. I was a librarian. A pause that carried something dry and warm in it simultaneously. The specific humor of someone describing themselves without self-pity. Tell me your theory, I said. I think it's time, she said. The sound. I think that's what time sounds like from outside it. When you're not on the line anymore, you can hear the line moving. Like standing outside a highway and hearing the traffic. I wrote that down in my private notebook. Not the official call log. My own. Eleanor, I said. The calls. You've been calling for 2 years. Have I? She said. Not surprised. Thoughtful. It's hard to track from here. 2 years sounds right. It might be longer. What are you calling for? I said. What do you need? The pause before her answer was the longest of the call. I'm not sure I need something, she said slowly. I think I might be calling for someone else. What do you mean? When I first started calling, she said, I thought I needed help. The way you think you need help when something is wrong, you call for help, someone comes, the wrong thing is fixed. But the calls don't work that way. No one can come. The address doesn't register. I understood that fairly quickly. But you kept calling, I said. I kept calling because of what happened when I called, she said. Not what happened on my end. What happened on your end? Tell me, I said. The people who answer, she said. When they answer me, when they hear me and respond and engage with what I'm saying, something happens. Not to me. To them. Or for them. It's hard to describe from where I am. It's like watching something through water. But there's a quality that changes. In the person on the other end of the line. Something that was one way becomes a different way. I don't understand, I said. You will, she said. And there was something in the way she said it that was not prediction and not certainty but something in between. The way a librarian says you will find what you're looking for. Not because they know what you will find. Because they know the finding is possible. The sound you can't locate, I said. You said you've been trying to understand the pattern. Yes. Have you made any progress? Some, she said. I think the pattern repeats. Not exactly, it varies. But it returns. Like a theme in music. I was never musical, but David was. He used to explain music to me in terms of return. The way a piece of music leaves a home note and goes elsewhere and comes back. He said that's what music was. Leaving and returning. David was your husband, I said. A pause. You've done research, she said. Some, I said. I hope that's okay. It's okay, she said. David died for years before I did. Before I came here. A pause. He's not here. I thought he might be. I've looked. The line was very quiet for a moment. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said. He's somewhere. I'm certain of that. He's just not where I am. Which means there's more than one somewhere. Which I find interesting rather than distressing. I was always interested in libraries because I was interested in the fact that there were more books than you could read. More worlds than you could visit. I find it comforting that this appears to extend further than I expected. I sat at station 4 in a dispatch center at 3 in the morning listening to a dead woman describe the geography of wherever she was and finding it comforting, and I felt the specific quality of a conversation that was more real than most of the conversations I had while being awake and alive in the ordinary world. Eleanor, I said. You said you're calling for someone else. Not for yourself. Yes, she said. Who? She was quiet for a moment. The people who answer, she said. I told you something changes in them. When they hear me. When they engage with what I'm saying. Something that was one way becomes a different way. What way was it before? I said. She was quiet for a long time. Closed, she said finally. The word that comes to me is closed. Something that had been closed for a long time. Not by choice, by the work. By what the work does to people over time. I did not say anything. You hear terrible things, she said. Every night. You hear the worst moments of people's lives. And the work requires you to be functional in the face of that. To be present and clear and useful when the person on the other end of the line needs you to be those things. And you learn to be. You become very good at being those things. Yes, I said. And something closes, she said. To allow it. Not your competence. Not your care. I can hear the care in the people who answer me. The care is still there. But something underneath the care. Something personal. Something that knows the difference between hearing someone's worst moment and being safe from your own. I held the phone and looked at the wall of the dispatch center and felt what she was describing arrive in me with the specific quality of something true that you have known and not looked at directly for a long time. The calls, she said. When they go well. When the person on the other end stays with me and listens. Something opens. Just slightly. Just for the duration of the call. And I think, she stopped. What? I said. I think that's enough, she said. I think that's what the calling is for. I don't think I'm trying to get help. I think I'm trying to give it. The line was quiet. I think you called me, she said, and I called you, and this is what we're doing. Eleanor, I said. Is there anything you need? Anything at all? Tell me something about yourself, she said. Something real. Something you don't say out loud. I thought about the relationship that had ended. About the city I had left. About 6 years of sitting at the boundary between the ordinary world and its worst moments and driving home in the morning and saying fine to the person in the coffee shop. I told her. Not the details. The shape of it. The specific quality of what the work had done to the part of me that knew the difference between other people's emergencies and my own. The closing that she had named so precisely. She listened the way a librarian listens. The complete, patient, non-interjecting attention of someone who understands that the point is to let you find what you're saying rather than to tell you what you're saying before you find it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said. That was real. Yes, I said. I should go, she said. The warmth from the window doesn't last forever. And you have work. Eleanor. I'll call again, she said. If that's all right. It's more than all right, I said. Good, she said. And there was something in the word that was the full, warm, specific quality of someone who has received something they needed. Not given. Received. The line went quiet. Not disconnected. The way it always went quiet with Eleanor Marsh. As if the voice had simply stepped back from the window. And the window was still there. I went to the address on a Saturday morning. Not because the protocol required it. Not because Rains had asked me to. Because I had been listening to Eleanor Marsh for 3 weeks across 6 calls that had each lasted between 20 minutes and an hour, and I had reached the point where listening through a phone line was not enough and I needed to stand in the place she was calling from and understand something about it that the calls alone could not give me. I drove 40 minutes into the rural part of the county that I was still learning after 3 weeks at the center. The geography of a rural service area is different from the city geography I had worked in for 6 years, less dense, less obvious, the kind of landscape that reveals itself slowly and in pieces rather than all at once. Farms and forest and the occasional cluster of buildings that constituted a community and the long stretches of road between them. The road that had been Aldridge Road was not difficult to find. The county map in the center's database showed it as a closed road with the notation property development, access restricted. The signage was gone, but the road itself was still there, or the ghost of it was, the cleared path through the forest that a road leaves when the road is removed, the specific topographic indication of human intention that the forest had not yet had enough time to erase. I parked at the point where the road had been closed and walked. The walk was approximately 400 meters through mixed forest. The October morning was cold and still. No wind. The specific quality of a Saturday morning in a rural area that has no event scheduled for it and no particular reason for being one way rather than another. The property was at the end of the ghost road. There was nothing there. I want to be precise about that because nothing is not quite right. There was not the absence of a building, not the cleared, flattened, deliberately emptied space of a demolition site. Something more complicated than that. The demolition had happened 3 years ago, but the land had not been cleared in the way that development land is typically cleared. There were foundation remnants. A concrete perimeter mostly buried in undergrowth, visible only if you were looking for it. There were the specific artifacts of a domestic space that demolition does not fully remove, the ghost of a path from what had been a front door, the depression that had been a garden, the mature trees that had been planted by someone as part of a landscaped space and that had outlasted the space. There was the specific quality of a place that had been lived in for a long time by people who had cared about it. Not haunted in the dramatic, conventional sense. Present. In the way that loved places are present even when the physical structures are gone. In the way that the places where people have been fully themselves leave something in the ground and the air and the specific arrangement of light through the trees that the removal of the structure does not remove. I walked the perimeter of the foundation. The site was approximately the footprint of a modest house. 2 stories perhaps. The foundation perimeter suggested a living space, a kitchen area, rooms that the plan of the foundation implied without specifying. I stood at what had been the front of the house, the side of the foundation nearest the ghost road, where the path depression was most clear, and I tried to imagine 14 Aldridge Road standing here. Tried to imagine Eleanor Marsh standing in it. A librarian. 30 years. A husband who explained music in terms of leaving and returning. A house she had lived in for 22 years. The specific fullness of a life well inhabited in a specific place. And then the house gone while she was still alive. Demolished by a development company's purchase. Eleanor Marsh presumably having moved, the records didn't show where, only the death certificate showing cardiac failure 2 years ago and the address as the house that no longer existed. Calling from the house that no longer existed. From an address that had been removed from every database. I crouched at the foundation perimeter and put my hand on the concrete. It was cold. Not unusually cold for an October morning in the Pacific Northwest. But cold in the way that Eleanor had described the house as cold. Not the ambient cold of an autumn morning. A cold with direction. Coming from somewhere below and somewhere inside the space that the foundation enclosed. I stood inside the foundation perimeter. The space of the former house. And I stood there and I tried to understand what it was like to call from here. To be in whatever form Eleanor Marsh now occupied at this location and to pick up a phone that had been disconnected 3 years ago and call a dispatch center 40 miles away and hear a voice answer and try to explain that something was wrong in a way that could not be fixed. I stood there for a long time. Then I took out my phone and I called the center. Not the emergency line. Raines's direct line. She answered on the second ring. I'm at the site, I said. A pause. How is it, she said. Present, I said. The property is gone but it's present. You can feel what it was. Yes, she said. The word carrying something that told me she had been here too. That she had made this same drive at some point in 14 months of monitoring Eleanor Marsh. Raines, I said. The operators who have taken her calls. The ones you briefed versus the ones who took the call before they knew. What happened to them? A pause longer than the previous one. Define happened, she said. You said the briefing shaped the experience, I said. That you wanted an unbriefed operator because the briefed ones responded differently. What does differently mean? She was quiet for a moment. The briefed operators, she said, managed the calls. They were professional. They listened with the specific quality of listening that maintains distance. The distance that the knowledge of what she is produces. And the ones who took the call before they knew. I said. There were 4 of them before you, she said. Operators who took Eleanor Marsh's call without prior knowledge and engaged with her in genuine conversation before the call ended. What happened to them? I said. Another pause. One of them requested a transfer to a non-dispatch role, she said. Not because the call distressed her. She described it as clarifying. She said she understood after the call that the work had been taking something from her for years that she needed back, and that understanding it clearly made it impossible to continue in the same way. She left dispatch, I said. She's in records management now, Rain said. She says she's happier. And the others? I said. One took extended leave, she said. Personal reasons. He came back 3 months later and requested a change to day shift. He's been on days for 18 months. He's also described the call as clarifying. The third. I said. The third, she said, had her most significant professional breakthrough in the weeks following the call. She had been struggling with aspects of the work for years. After the call, she began a process that she described as understanding what the work was costing her and making conscious choices about that cost rather than absorbing it without awareness. The closing Eleanor described, I said. Yes, Rain said. And the fourth? I said. A long pause. The fourth is me, she said. I stood in the foundation of Eleanor Marsh's demolished house and held my phone and waited. I took the call 14 months ago, Rain said. Before I had identified the pattern. Before I had found the file. I was covering a gap in the overnight schedule, which I do occasionally, and the call came through to my station and I answered it. What did she say to you? I said. She said what she says, Rain said. The cold. The sound. The uncertainty about whether the calls go through. I engaged with her the way I've been asking you to engage with her. Before I knew. Before any of the knowledge that changes the engagement. And then? I said. And then I found the file, she said. And spent 14 months trying to understand what the calls were for. What Eleanor Marsh needed. She doesn't need anything, I said. She told me. She's calling for us. For the operators. A silence on the line. I know, Rain said quietly. You've known, I said. I've suspected, she said. For some time. But suspecting is not the same as understanding, and I needed someone to hear it from her directly. To have her say it to an unbriefed ear and report back. She's a dispatcher, I said. In whatever she is now, wherever she is, she's dispatching. She's identified a need and she's responding to it. Yes, Rain said. I looked at the foundation around me. At the ghost of a domestic space. At the trees that had been planted and the path depression and the concrete perimeter half buried in undergrowth. At the specific presence of a place that had been fully inhabited. 30 years as a librarian, I said. Then she dies. And she finds herself in a place where time doesn't work like a line. And she hears the sound she thinks is time moving. And she picks up the phone. Because it was what she knew how to do, Rain said. Help people find what they were looking for. She heard us, I said. The dispatchers. From wherever she is. She heard what the work sounds like from outside the line. And she started calling. Because she could, Rain said. Because the house, whatever the house is from where she is, had the phone. Her phone. Connected to whatever the disconnected line connects to. And because no one else was going to, I said. The October forest was quiet around the foundation. No wind. The specific stillness of a place that is used to holding things quietly. Rains, I said. After your call. After the one you took 14 months ago. What changed for you? A long silence. I stopped pretending the work wasn't costing me anything, she said. I had been in dispatch for 13 years at that point. 13 years of the thing Eleanor describes. The closing. I had built very effective professional structures around it. Around the cost. I had become very good at the work and very good at not examining what the work was doing. And the call changed that, I said. The call named it, she said. Eleanor said something to me in that first call that she has never said to me since. Something specific. I think she said it only once because it was what I needed to hear specifically, and she understood that, and once was sufficient. What did she say? I said. A pause. She said, the people who answer the phone in the worst moment of someone's life deserve someone to answer the phone in their worst moments too. And I've been thinking about that for 14 months. The foundation was cold around my feet. The cold Eleanor had described. The directional cold from below and inside. Who answers the phone for us? I said. Quietly. Not to Rains. Not really to anyone. She does, Rain said. I looked at the space around me. At what had been Eleanor Marsh's home. At the place she was calling from. At the demolished, database removed, disconnected phone line address that kept producing calls at 3 in the morning because Eleanor Marsh had understood something about the people who sat at dispatch stations through the night and had decided to do something about it. I'm going to keep taking her calls, I said. I know, Rain said. And I want you to stop briefing the other operators before they take them, I said. You were right that it shapes the experience. But not for the reason you thought. It's not about getting clean data. It's about letting the call be what it is. What she intends it to be. Yes, Rain said. She knows what she's doing, I said. She has always known what she's doing. I walked back through the ghost road to my car. The October forest on either side. The cold morning and the still air and the specific quality of a place that had been home to someone for 22 years and still carried the shape of that. I drove back to the town. I stopped at a coffee shop. The person behind the counter asked how I was. I thought about Eleanor Marsh in a house that no longer existed, calling through a disconnected line to tell dispatchers what the work was costing them. Good, I said. I'm actually good. And I meant it in a way I had not meant it in a very long time. She called on a Wednesday in November. 6 weeks after my first call from her. 8 calls total across that period, each one different from the previous in the way that conversations between people who are building something together are different, each one adding to what the previous ones had established, each one going somewhere the previous ones had prepared the ground for. I had come to know Eleanor Marsh the way you come to know someone through sustained, honest conversation. Not completely, there were things she couldn't describe and things she couldn't reach from where she was, and things that the medium of a phone call between the living and the dead, through a disconnected line, across whatever distance separated her location from mine, could not fully carry. But enough. I knew that she had been a librarian at the Millhaven County Library for 31 years. That she had started as a junior cataloger at 24 and had ended as head of reference services at 55, when a knee replacement had convinced her that retirement was not giving up but giving herself something she had earned. That the knee had given her 8 years of gardening and traveling, and the late-in-life discovery that she was a reasonably good amateur watercolorist before the cardiac failure that the death certificate recorded. I knew about David. Not just the fact of him but the quality of him. The way Eleanor talked about her husband had the specific character of someone describing a person who had been so fully known that description became almost unnecessary. Every reference to him was shorthand for a complete language. He explained music in terms of leaving and returning. He fixed the porch in 2009. He predeceased her by 4 years and was somewhere she was not, and she was certain of that somewhere even if she could not locate it. I knew about her daughter Claire, who lived in Oregon and who Eleanor mentioned with the warmth and the specific worry of a parent who loves her child and knows the child is functioning in the world and wishes she could tell her something that would be useful. I knew she had not told Claire she was calling because she did not know how to begin that conversation, and also because she thought it might frighten her and she did not want to be the source of Claire's fear. I knew about the cold and the sound and the quality of time from outside it. I knew about the window that the calls created, the warmth through the window that faded when the calls ended. I knew she had been trying to understand the pattern in the low sound that was time moving, and that she had made progress she was excited about. I knew that she had been doing this for 2 years and that it had not been easy and that she had kept doing it anyway because she had identified a need and she was the one positioned to respond to it, and she was not the kind of person who identified a need and didn't respond. At 2:23 a.m. on a Wednesday in November, Station 4's line lit and I answered and she said, "It's me." Not her name. Not the address. Just "it's me." The way you say it when you've reached the point where identification is unnecessary. "I know," I said. "How are you?" "I've made progress on the sound," she said. The specific energy of someone arriving with news. The pattern. "I told you it repeats. Like a theme in music." "Yes," I said. "I've been listening more carefully," she said. "I've had time. Time is one thing I have abundance of, from where I am." The dry warmth of her humor. The pattern doesn't just repeat. It develops. The way David explained music, it leaves the home note and goes elsewhere and returns. But what returns is not identical to what left. It's the same theme, but it's been somewhere. It carries what it found. What does the pattern carry when it returns? I said. Accumulation, she said. That's the word I keep arriving at. The pattern carries what has accumulated. Every return is slightly denser than the previous one. Slightly richer. Like a piece of music that revisits its theme after more has happened, and the theme means more because of what happened in between. What accumulates? I said. She was quiet for a moment. I think, she said, that it accumulates what has been lived. What has been experienced and felt and understood. I think the sound is what experience sounds like from outside the process of experiencing it. The whole of it. Everything that has been and is being lived by everyone on the line. The line, I said. The line, she said. The timeline. I think that's what it is. I think I'm not beside it or above it or outside it in any simple spatial sense. I think I'm adjacent to it. Like being in a room next to a room where music is being played. You can hear the music, but you're not in the room. I wrote that down. In my private notebook that had 41 pages of notes from 8 calls. Eleanor, I said. You said something in an earlier call. That you were calling for someone else. For us. The dispatchers. Yes, she said. I've been thinking about that, I said. About what you're doing when you call. What changes in the person on the other end? What have you concluded, she said. That you're doing what you always did, I said. As a librarian. You're helping people find what they're looking for. A pause. What are you looking for, she said. Not a deflection. A genuine question. The question of someone who knows the general answer and wants the specific one. I thought about it honestly. The way the calls had required honesty from the beginning. The way Eleanor Marsh, whatever Eleanor Marsh was now, had a quality that made dishonesty feel not forbidden but simply inadequate. Too small for the conversation. I think I'm looking for permission, I said. Permission for what, she said. To let the work be what it is, I said. Not to manage it. Not to build structures around the cost of it. To let it cost what it costs and to be someone who can absorb that cost and still be a person outside the work. She was quiet for a moment. Is that possible, she said. Genuinely asking. The question of someone who does not know the answer and wants to. I think so, I said. I think that's what you've been showing me. That the work and the person doing the work are not the same thing. That the boundary between them is something you maintain deliberately rather than something that exists automatically. I didn't know that when I was doing it, she said. Not with the clarity you're describing it. You know it now, I said. I know it now, she said. From the outside. A pause. I want to tell you something, she said. Something I haven't told the others who answered. Something I've been building toward for a long time. Tell me, I said. She was quiet for long enough that I checked the line to confirm it was still connected. The specific soundless quality of Eleanor's calls was sometimes indistinguishable from a disconnection, and I had learned to check. The line was there. The background texture that the technical consultant had called acoustically anomalous was present. The quality of a space with inconsistent physical boundaries. The quality of adjacent. "I know why I'm here," she said. "Tell me," I said again. "I didn't know for a long time," she said. "When I first arrived, I was confused the way I imagine most people are confused when they arrive. The geography is strange. The time is strange. The sense of purpose is very unclear." "What cleared it?" I said. "The calling," she said. "The first time I picked up the phone, I don't think I fully understood what I was doing. I just knew the phone was there and it seemed like the right thing to do. The phone had always been the right thing to do when something was wrong." "Old habit," I said. "Old habit," she said. But it turned out to be the right old habit. Because the calling clarified things. Each call I understood a little more about what I was doing here and why and what the doing of it produced. "What does it produce?" I said. "Something in the person who answers," she said. "You described it. Others have described it to the supervisor who keeps the record. A clarification. A naming of something that had been present but unnamed. The unnamed thing being the cost of the work and the way the cost had been managed through the specific strategy of not acknowledging it." "Eleanor," I said. "Why you? Why is it specifically you calling? Why not? Why not anyone else?" she said. "Yes." A pause. "I don't think it's specifically me," she said. "I think it's specifically the position. I'm adjacent to the line. I can hear it. I can reach the phone. Not everyone in this position can do those things. I think it depends on where you land when you arrive here. What you're adjacent to. What you can reach. You're adjacent to us," I said. "To the dispatchers. To the center, specifically," she said. "To this service area. To the particular frequency, if that's the right word, of this particular work done by these particular people. I arrived adjacent to the thing I could help with." "And you helped," I said. "I tried to," she said. "You did," I said. Another pause. The background texture of the call shifted slightly. A change in the quality of the adjacent space. As if something in it had moved. "I want to tell you something else," she said. The thing I said I was building toward. "Tell me," I said. "The sound," she said. "The pattern. The accumulation that returns. I've been listening to it for 2 years from where I am. And what I've understood, in the last weeks, is that the accumulation includes this. These calls. What they produce in the people who answer. The things that change in the dispatchers after they talk to me. The calls are part of the pattern," I said. "The calls are part of what accumulates," she said. "What is experienced and felt and understood. What I'm doing when I call, the help I'm trying to give, it enters the accumulation. It becomes part of what the pattern carries when it returns." I sat with that. "You're not just helping us," I said slowly. "You're adding to something. The calls are part of the record," she said. "The full record. Of what has been lived and what has mattered. Every conversation between a dispatcher and the worst moment of someone's life. Every moment where someone answered the phone in their own worst moment and found a voice on the other end that heard them. All of it part of the accumulation." "Why are you telling me this?" I said. She was quiet for a long moment. "Because I think tonight is different," she said. I looked at the station. At the monitors. At the quiet call center at 2:30 in the morning. At the other operators at their stations, headsets on, doing the work. "Different how?" I said. "The sound is different tonight," she said. "The pattern. It's at a point in its cycle that I haven't heard before. A return, but a different kind of return. A return that is, she stopped. I don't have good language for this. Try, I said. A return that is complete, she said. The theme leaving and returning, and the return being the full version of what the leaving was always moving toward. Not a partial return. Not another stage of the approach. The arrival. I did not say anything. I think I've been here for as long as I needed to be here, she said. I think the calling was the work. And I think the work is done. The line was very quiet. Eleanor, I said. And my voice had a quality in it that was not the dispatch voice. Not the trained, professional, managed voice that 6 years of the work had built. Something underneath that. I know, she said. Gently. I know. The other operators, I said. The ones who answered before I got here. And me. You're not finished. There will be more people who answer who need. There will be other callers for them, she said. I'm not the only one adjacent. I found the phone. Others find other things. Other ways to reach the people who need reaching. A pause. The work does not depend on me. The work has always been larger than any one person doing it. You're sure? I said. I am sure, she said. I looked at the call log on my station. At the call duration counter running in the lower right of the screen. 47 minutes. The longest call I had taken from Eleanor Marsh. Is where you're going, I stopped. Started again. Is there something on the other side of the arrival? She was quiet for a moment. I think so, she said. I think the pattern arriving fully means something that the partial pattern could only suggest. What it means I don't know from here. But I'm not afraid. No, I said. I didn't think you were. David is probably there, she said. Wherever the full arrival goes. He was always better at music than I was. He probably understood the pattern from the moment he arrived. A pause that carried something small and warm and private in it. He'll want to explain it to me. I did not say anything for a moment. Thank you, I said finally. For calling. For 2 years of calling. Thank you for answering, she said. For really answering. Not just picking up the phone. For answering in the way that the call required. I almost didn't, I said. Before I knew who you were, before I knew what the calls were, I almost just followed protocol. Address verification. Standard procedure. But you didn't, she said. No, I said. Because something in the call told you that the call required more than procedure, she said. That's why you were the right person to take it. Not the only person who could have. But the right person at the right time. Eleanor. I need to go, she said. The pattern is at the arrival point. If I miss it, I don't know when it returns to this point, and I've been waiting for it for long enough. Okay, I said. Will you do something for me, she said. Anything, I said. Tell the supervisor, she said. The one who keeps the record. Tell her that the calls were what they were supposed to be. That she was right to keep the record and right to pay attention and right not to block the number. Tell her the calls did what I intended. I'll tell her, I said. And tell the operators, she said. Not the details. They don't need the details. Tell them that the work costs something and that the cost is real and that acknowledging the cost is not weakness and that there are people paying attention to them in ways they don't know. People adjacent to them who hear them working through the night and who think it matters. I'll tell them, I said. And you, she said. You specifically. Yes, I said. The thing that closed, she said. Open it deliberately. Not because you have to. Because the work is better when you do. Because you are better when you do. Because the dispatchers who acknowledge what the work costs them are the dispatchers who can do it longest and most fully. The ones who don't are the ones who eventually cannot continue. I know, I said. I know you know, she said. I wanted to say it anyway. Explicitly. So you had heard it from someone else. Sometimes you need to hear it from someone else. The call counter read 53 minutes. Goodbye, Eleanor Marsh said. 2 words. The simplest words. The words that had been at the end of every human conversation since human conversations began. Goodbye, Eleanor, I said. The line went quiet. Not the usual quiet. Not the step back from the window quality of her previous endings. A different quiet. The quiet of something that has been in one place for a long time and has moved to another. The complete quiet. The arrival. I sat at station for a long time without moving. The call log showed the call duration. 54 minutes. The longest call in the Millhaven Centre's 2 years of Eleanor Marsh's record. The caller ID field showed the disconnected number of 14 Aldridge Road. The address field showed no result. I opened the private notebook. 41 pages of notes. I turned to a new page and I wrote down what she had asked me to tell the supervisor and what she had asked me to tell the operators and what she had said specifically to me. Then I wrote one more thing. Not a note from the call. Something of my own. Eleanor Marsh called this center for 2 years from an address that doesn't exist on a phone that doesn't work. She called because she was a librarian and she understood that people needed help finding what they were looking for and she was in a position to help. She identified a need in the people who answered the phone in other people's worst moments and she responded to that need with the only tools she had. She was a dispatcher. She just dispatched from a different location. The calls will not come anymore. The line will be quiet. What the calls produced will not be quiet. At 7 am I went to Rains. She looked at my face the way she had looked at it on my first morning. Reading it. The specific skill of 15 years in dispatch, the ability to read a face for what is actually in it rather than what the person has prepared to show. She's gone, Rains said. Yes, I said. I gave her Eleanor's message. The thing she had asked me to pass on. Rains listened with her eyes on the desk and her hands folded on it and the specific quality of someone receiving something they have been anticipating for a long time and have not fully prepared for anyway. When I finished she was quiet for a moment. The record, she said. 2 years of calls. What do I do with it? I thought about Eleanor's description of the accumulation. The pattern that carried what had been lived. The calls as part of what accumulated. Part of the record of what had mattered. Keep it, I said. It belongs to the record. She nodded. I walked out of her office. Through the monitoring floor. Past the 12 operator stations with their operators doing the work. The specific focused quality of people at the boundary between the ordinary world and its worst moments. People doing the loneliest job in the world. I stopped at Station 4. The station where I had answered 54 minutes of Eleanor Marsh's last call. Where I had taken 8 calls from a dead woman on a disconnected phone line from a demolished house and had understood, across those 8 calls, something about the work and the cost of the work and the person underneath the work that 6 years of doing it had not taught me. I sat down. I put on the headset. The morning shift was beginning around me. The other operators settling in. The day building toward whatever it would bring. I looked at the call log. At the empty line where the call from Eleanor Marsh would not appear this morning. I thought about what she had said. Open it deliberately. Not because you have to. Because you are better when you do. I thought about a woman in a house that no longer existed picking up a phone that could not make calls and calling a dispatch center because she had identified a need and she had the means to respond to it and she was not the kind of person who identified a need and didn't respond. I thought about 31 years of helping people find what they were looking for. And 2 more years after that. Station 4's line lit. I answered. Emergency services. What is the nature of your emergency? A voice. A real voice. A living person in a real crisis in the real world calling because something had gone wrong and they needed someone to answer. I answered. Completely. Without the managed distance. Without the professional structure around the cost. With the specific, full, open quality of listening that the work required and that I had spent 6 years building structures to avoid and that Eleanor Marsh had spent 2 years calling across a disconnected line to tell me was possible. The voice told me what was wrong. I listened. And somewhere adjacent to the ordinary world, in a place where time is a room rather than a line and the sound of accumulation plays like music, a woman who had been a librarian and then a caller and then something that had no name in any living language moved toward the full arrival of a pattern that had been building toward her for a very long time. And at the center of the pattern, warm and returning and carrying everything it had found in its leaving, David was waiting to explain. And she let him.